This week on Jerusalem Dateline, who's behind the Palestinian March of Return? Plus, CBN Scott Ross gets a rare look at the heart-wrenching last letters of the Holocaust. Also, an explanation of why some compare U.S. President Trump to King Cyrus of the Bible, and how Holocaust survivors are getting the help they need. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Israel's defense forces expect more Palestinians to march on the Israeli-Gaza border during the coming weeks of the March of Return. The leaders of Hamas hope to make Israel look like Goliath during their so-called peaceful border protests. But critics say their border infiltration is part of a larger war against the Jewish state and that they have plenty of helpers in that war. Last week, 18 Palestinians died when Hamas operatives and their supporters ignored warnings by Israel and charged the border with Gaza. This week, young Gazans are collecting thousands of tires to burn. They know Israel plans to use live fire to protect the border, and the goal is to engulf the area in smoke and flames and obscure the soldiers' vision. Why would they risk their own lives when they have no chance of physically taking back the Arab villages lost in the 1948 war against Israel? Itamar Marquez is the director of the Palestinian Media Watch.
Tragically, what they have learned is that dead Palestinians make for good PR for the Palestinian Authority and for Hamas, and that is what this is all about. They want Israel to be forced to fire. They want their people to cross the border into Israel, to threaten Israelis, and to be shot and killed, because that is what wins the war for them.
Hamas couldn't pose such a threat to Israel without help. So who's helping them? Middle East analysts say, look first to Turkey and Iran.
There are Turkish organizations that collect money for Hamas. We know that the Iranians are also sending money in suitcases, millions of dollars, in order to help Hamas survive a difficult economic period.
Middle East analyst Ephraim Inbar says Turkey has a Sunni connection with Hamas, which was founded by the Muslim Brotherhood, and Shiite Iran uses Hamas as a Sunni beachhead against Israel.
The Iranians as well as the Turks understand the military power of Israel, and they understand that Hamas cannot overcome this military power only by a strategy of attrition. They want the Israelis eventually to get tired, and their dream is that the Israelis will leave their country.
The Palestinians also hope to charge Israeli leaders with war crimes in the International Criminal Court. They're backed by the Arab League in that effort. Marcus says the Palestinians have another helper: international media outlets who don't report that Hamas is a terror group committed to Israel's destruction. And he draws an interesting parallel between President Trump's decision to send troops to the Mexican border and Israel's clash with Hamas.
Now, what's significant here is the Mexicans who are going to be facing armed National Guards now, they're not coming to commit terror. They're coming just to get a job, just to get a better life. The ones coming in from Gaza facing Israeli soldiers, they're coming to commit terror. They're coming because they say, we want your country. So-called March of Return.
While Palestinians in Gaza are trying to demonize Israel, a major Arab leader took the bold step of recognizing that Israel has a right to the land. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia made that statement, and it's just the latest action taken by the Crown Prince that has many asking the questions: who is this new leader, and what does he mean for the world? The statement by the Crown Prince was a first for a Saudi leader. He said, I believe the Palestinians and the Israelis have the right to have their own land. His statement is one of many changes from Prince Mohammed. He's permitting Saudi women to drive. He opened Saudi airspace to a commercial flight to Israel. And earlier, he said the kingdom would be a place for all religions. Evangelical leader Johnny Moore believes Ben Salman's changes signal a new day in the Middle East.
I couldn't believe my ears, actually, when I was watching the news report where the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia said directly, verbatim, he said, "This kingdom will become a kingdom for all religions." I had to watch it again. He was crystal clear. Now, when you think about this, I mean, this is Saudi Arabia, and yet there is this new openness.
Many explain this new openness as an indication that Ben Salman wants to open up Saudi Arabia to the world. One more example, on April 1st, Saudi Arabia issued their first tourist visas. Middle East observers also see the growing relationship between Saudi Arabia and the Jewish state as a sign they both recognize Iran as a common danger. The Crown Prince even called Iran's Ayatollah Khamenei worse than Hitler.
So they will stick to anyone who shares their fear from the Iranians.
Islamic expert Mordecai Kadar believes Saudi Arabia is living out the saying of the Middle East, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend."
They feel much more vulnerable than Israel. First of all, they are closer to Iran than Israel. We have buffer zone like Iraq and Jordan. They don't have any buffer. And the most important thing is that the Iranians want to take over Mecca and Medina to resume the Shi'i caliphate.
But Kadar says Prince Mohammed arrested many of his own family and could reap what he has sown.
He actually worked totally against the tradition of the desert, of the Bedouin tradition. They will never forget and they will never forgive. They are waiting for the moment to take revenge. I'm more than sure.
In the meantime, Moore sees the winds of change in the Middle East.
It's a new day in the Middle East, and it actually seems like the Prince of Peace is at work.
Up next, Scott Ross takes an up-close and exclusive look at the last letters of the Holocaust. Each year, Israelis pause to remember the Holocaust, the slaughter of 6 million Jews by the Nazis and their collaborators. In talking about such a daunting subject, it's often hard to grasp the reality of each person's story, their life, family, hopes, and dreams. A new online exhibit from Israel's Holocaust Museum aims to tell those stories, and CBN Scott Ross visited Yad Vashem in Jerusalem to bring us that story.
My dear Rosie, I am happy that you received our greetings. What are you up to, my darling? Be well. Many kisses from your mother.
In every letter at the beginning and at the end, she wrote, "Make sure to take care of your health."
That's the final letter Rosie Yoshkovitz received from her mother, Berta.
Each story is unique. In those online exhibitions, we are telling stories first to commemorate the victims, to give them back their names, human dignity.
Yona Kobo oversees the new exhibit, Last Letters from the Holocaust, 1943.
The letters were chosen because they are very intimate, very personal, very unique, because each handwriting is different from one person to the other. You can find stains of tears of those who wrote the letters and tears of those who received the letter.
When you read these letters from mothers, fathers, children, what does that do to your heart?
Sometimes it's tearing me apart. Sometimes I'm crying.
How were they delivered? Was there there was no postal service?
The post service worked the entire war, even in the camps.
Censorship?
Sometimes not, but I think they censored themselves.
Kobo gave us an extremely rare look at Yad Vashem's vast archives, where I saw some of the actual letters.
What does this say?
That was written by a child. She was almost 12 years old. Her name was Regina Folkenflick, and she was living at East Poland. She was hidden at a Christian family. Her parents thought that was the best way to save her, by putting her in a good family. But the child was shot. The rest of the family survived. And her brother, now 84 years old, donated the letter to Yad Vashem. It's in Polish, and she's writing, "Dear mother and father and dear Dolik," her brother, be well. Mommy, don't be upset. Please forgive me, Mommy, for writing so little.
And here's another one.
That is another one, written by a young woman, 19 years old, Rosette Bomblat. She was active in a group of underground movement in Paris. She helped saving other Jewish children. Her family was hidden in a village not far away from Paris. And Rosette is writing here in French. I'm only living for the day that we will be together again. All the family, except of Rosette and her oldest sister Sarah, survived and emigrated to Israel.
She didn't.
She didn't. She was transferred to Auschwitz. She was murdered in the camp.
What about your family?
My mother was born in Germany, and she has been through a ghetto, a labor camp, and a very, very long death march. She marched 800 kilometers by foot. My father survived Auschwitz. And they met after the war was over. And when I was older, like 35 years old, my father remembered to tell me his secret. He was a widow when he met my mom. He lost his first wife and baby daughter in Belzitz. I just recently found the name of his daughter.
This online exhibit is just one of many at Yad Vashem, the main collection of Holocaust documentation in the world.
So one of the main missions of Yad Vashem is to collect into one place all the documents, all the evidence about the fate of Jews during the Holocaust. It was the first intention of Holocaust survivors the first day after the war was ended.
Dr. Chaim Gertner is director of the archives.
We understood that the Nazis not only planned to murder the Jews, but also understood or wanted to annihilate, to erase our ability to know who were they and what happened to them.
Erase their memory.
So this is why Yad Vashem decided as one of its most important missions to collect all those pieces of huge puzzle of our joint history into one place.
The more than 200 million pages of documentation includes testimony, survivors' stories, photos, and other personal items.
We launched 7 years ago a national campaign. We call it Gathering the Fragments. We met until now close to 11,000 people who donated to us during the last 7 years more than 124,000 items and collections.
And are there many survivors living today that have seen this, been here, and experienced this?
Yes, Holocaust survivors do see Yad Vashem as the home of their items, and they say here it will be kept forever. He will preserve it. And I may tell you the story, for example, of this sweater over here.
Yes.
That was donated to us on the first day of this campaign 7 years ago by a lady from Tel Aviv. It was belonged to her sister. So for her, it took a lot of time to decide to separate with that.
The name Yad Vashem comes from the Bible. It means a memorial and a name.
Yad Vashem, during the last 2 decades and more, is struggling to tell the story of individuals in the Holocaust. They were human beings that used to live in Europe and elsewhere, and they had lives, they had kids, they had dreams.
How important is it to have all this online?
Around 1 million visitors are coming to Yad Vashem every year. Almost 10,000 of them are visiting our reading room every year. But last year, more than 19 million people all over the world, Jews and non-Jews, used our databases online.
Because you're around this and have explored this and researched it, do you become jaded at all? I mean, it has to affect your heart.
I am a son of a Holocaust survivor myself.
I was going to ask you that.
I think that as an educator, our mission here to educate the next generation is what gives us the strength to think ahead, what to do with that story for generations to come.
Scott Ross for CBN at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem.
Before the 2016 presidential election, some evangelical Christians began comparing Donald Trump to King Cyrus, the biblical king who's credited with allowing Jews to return to Jerusalem from exile in the Babylonian Empire. The idea behind the comparison is that a non-believing leader can be used by God to enact policies that help advance the interest of believers, in this case, Christians and Jews. And today we're joined by Israeli author Gil Troy. He is an historian who has written this upcoming book, The Zionist Ideas, Visions for the Jewish Homeland, Then, Now, and Tomorrow. What do you make of all of this?
You know, those of us lucky enough to visit Jerusalem know that we don't count in decades, we don't count in centuries, we count in millennia. You're swimming in history. And so when you see someone do something good for the Jewish people, you put them in historical context. And Harry Truman, after he recognized the State of Israel within 11 minutes of its founding in 1948, was thanked. And he said, I am Cyrus, because he was going back to the Persian king. And so it's not surprising that we would look at Donald Trump, say he did something good for the Jewish people, he did something good for the American people, he did something good for the world, and say, you're part of that historical chain.
Well, what are your thoughts about how the Trump administration has acted with regard to the State of Israel overall?
So far, he's been a good friend. I think to stand up to the world, to stand up to the bullies of the world and say, look, I'm going to recognize the obvious. Jerusalem is the capital of the State of Israel. Jerusalem is the capital of the people of Israel for 3,500 years, and just embrace it is a great thing, and we should say thank you. And those who are critical of Trump should take this opportunity to say, you know what? I'm critical of him on A, B, C, D, but on this, I thank you. And it hurts me that some people have allowed their hatred of Donald Trump to, dare I say, trump their love of Jerusalem and love of Israel.
Well, your new book, The Zionist Ideas, Visions for the Jewish Homeland Then, Now, and Tomorrow. Explain to us exactly, what does Zionism mean, and why should Christians care?
Zionism goes back to Mount Zion. It goes back to Jerusalem, which is the heart and soul of the Jewish people, but also is, of course, so important to the Christian religion, too. And Zionism says that the Jews, first of all, are a people. We're not just a religion. We're this mix of religion and people. And as a people, we have a tie to a particular homeland, the Holy Land, which doesn't mean others don't also, but we have that deep, deep tie, and that we have the right to establish a state on that homeland. So it's peoplehood, it's land, and it's statehood. And Christian Zionists should embrace Zionism for two fundamental reasons. First of all, it's one of the great stories. A story of a people beaten up, broken down, persecuted, almost destroyed, and coming back. Talk about redemption. Talk about renewing your faith in God and in peoplehood. That's an amazing thing. But more than that, at this age in America, when we're so divided, when we're looking for inspirations, when we need to remember the core values of the American revolutionaries, the core values of democracy, this is a story of democracy. This is a story in the Middle East, in the hostile Middle East, of democracy flourishing, of a country that has shared values, shared interests, and now shared challenges in building a democracy that America and Israel can be together. So I think that Zionism is an opportunity for us to remind us who we are as a biblical people, as an ideological people, as Democrats, lowercase d, people who believe in democracy, and as idealists who want to make the world a better place, be it here in the United States or in Israel.
Why did you decide to write this book? I mean, do you feel like God put it on your heart?
I feel like in 1959, when a first version of this book came out, the state of Israel was very fragile, and the conversation about Zionism was very robust. Now, unfortunately, the conversation about Zionism has turned very fragile, even though the state of Israel is robust. And I want to bring back that conversation about these ideas, about who we are as a people, and how we can be in partnership together to make the world a better place and to make our lives better. And it comes from God, it comes from the Bible, it comes from democracy, it comes from America. These are all the fundamentals that help us find meaning in our lives. And I want to push the conversation, not just from the political conversation, but to the identity conversation. How do we, Jewish or not Jewish, looking to this place, this Holy Land, get inspiration? How does it give us meaning? How does it give us anchors in this crazy world of me, my, more? This is about us. This is about God. This is about the history. This is about tradition. This is about meaning.
Up next, see how Christians are helping two survivors of the Holocaust. Isaac and Luba are Holocaust survivors living in Israel. See how Christians are brightening their day and helping them make ends meet.
Isaac and Luba enjoy tending the flowers together on their balcony. It's a good distraction from their horrific memories of life as children in the Ukrainian ghettos of World War II.
I remember those moments in the ghetto better than I remember yesterday. The Nazis came and they went from town to town killing the Jews. There was a Christian man who owned a bakery in our area, and when the Nazis came, he told them that there were no Jews here, so they went on.
Both Isaac and Luba's fathers were fighting on the front with the Red Army, so their families had to survive in the ghetto on their own.
Jews in the ghetto could not leave, and there was very little food. More than 10 people were forced to live in our small home, and they slept wherever they could. It was so cold, and disease spread. Half the population of the ghetto perished.
One day I was with my mother in the square, and the soldier threatened to shoot us if she did not give up her gold earrings. She did, and he let us go.
After they ran out of things to barter with, Isaac learned how to sew gloves and other clothing, which helped him and his mother endure until liberation. Both Luba and Isaac lost many family members and friends by the end of the war.
It's something you never forget. It forever sits in your head and in your heart. And it's there. It's always there.
Isaac and Luba met after the war and started a family, eventually moving to Israel. They will soon celebrate their 60th anniversary. But in recent years, they've started to feel isolated, and it's been difficult for them to come up with enough money for food. So CBN Israel regularly takes them groceries.
It means so much to us when you come to our house and bring us food. It means much more than material help. You give us happiness that is worth millions.
We also put on special events for Holocaust survivors throughout Israel, like this one, Christ Church in Jerusalem's Old City. Survivors share their stories with Christians, and Christians honor them with songs and fellowship. We treat them to a meal and give each Holocaust survivor a walker or cane if needed.
It's a miracle when Christians meet us and they want to know us and they want to hear our story. My spirit is lifted and there is a joy in my heart.
We live for meetings like this with you. Thank you so much to the Christians that love us. Because we love them, I don't know what could be better. We have the same God, and God unites us.
Well, that's all for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.